Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Fiber Circus. It's November the 7th, 2018, and it's a Wednesday, the day after the wonderful elections here in the United States. So I hope everybody went out and voted, because if you don't vote, you can't complain, really. You can find me online as Spotted Circus on Instagram and Ravelry. You can also find me on Etsy as Spotted Circus, and on Facebook as Spotted Circus Alpacas. All my show notes are going to be down below underneath the arrow. If you click on it, you can find links to everything that I talk about this week. And if you also would please hit the subscribe button, it would really help to get my podcast out to more viewers. So if you're a new viewer, thanks a lot for coming along. I'm glad that you're here. And if you're a returning viewer, thanks a lot for coming back. It's awesome that you decided to come back again. If you need to email me, also, you can email me at spottedcircusalpacas@yahoo.com. So get a hold of me anyway. I tend to check my messages pretty regularly. So first things first, works in progress. So when last we met, I was getting ready to vend at SAFF out in North Carolina. So in theory, I shouldn't have had a whole lot of crafting time because I would be extremely busy vending and hopefully selling things to people. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Friday was a really awesome day, great sales. Saturday and Sunday were really, really slow. And when it's really slow, you get time to craft, which isn't ideal. You don't want to be like that. But I had a project along that I knew would be pretty mindless for me to work on. So I worked on my Geek socks, and this little California stitch marker is where I started at. This is a free pattern on Ravelry by Wei S leong. It's basically a really simple slip stitch pattern. It's written actually for top down, but I'm doing them toe up because that's how I prefer to do my socks, because I get to the point where I say, okay, I'm done with these, and then I kind of quit. So hopefully I'm going to go a little bit farther. So I've got heels on both of them, and probably about a 2-inch cuff as of right now. The yarn that I used is the Spotted Circus, and it is my Sparkle Merino base. You can see there's Lurex in there. There we go. And it's actually called the Storm Clouds colorway. And it's a self-striper that is 5 stripes long. So this is all the knitting that I've majorly worked on in the last 2 weeks. No, I take that back. I have something new in my cast-ons that I've started that I've spent a little bit more time on. The socks are just kind of an afterthought thing, and they're not exactly a priority for me to work on right now, so it's just something I work on every now and then. And it is in my Little Skein in the Big Wool. Let me think. The bag is... oh, the Choose Your Own Adventure bag that was part of the Knit More Girls Choose Your Own Adventure knit along. And it's a nice handy little bag. It's got a great handle, so you can really carry it around pretty easily. So, that's really my major work in progress, except for the next one. So, I cast on after SAFF because I decided that if certain yarns don't sell, it's essentially like having a giant stash. And somebody asked me out at SAFF, how do you decide what colors to dye? And I told them, I dye what, if I was to go out of business tomorrow, what it is I would still want to knit personally. Because if so, I've got the hugest stash in the world. So I tend to pull things out of there. And one of the new bases that I had, I really wanted to start trying to knit something out of it so that way I could have some kind of a shop sample. So I decided to cast on for The Shift by Andrea Mowerey. And it is a cowl that's knit from end to end and then seamed up in the back. And it's designed to be knit with spin cycle yarns. So this is basically just 2 skeins that alternate colors. It's very similar to a hand spun, but I decided instead to put it into solids. So I started this, I think, middle of last week, and it's taken all of season 2 of Orange is the New Black and a few episodes of Orange is the New Black season 3. So this is where I'm at right now. So I've gotten up to section 5, and there are 9 sections in it. So this is my Merpack Yak Silk base, and it's a merino, alpaca, yak, and mulberry silk DK weight. The green color is called Spring Leaf. The teal is the color of money. The purple color is Grape Ape. Then you get into the red, which is Barn Red. And then you start to get into this orange, which is called Pumpkin Spice Latte. So I'm liking the way it knits so far. It's got really nice stitch definition, and I think it's going to look really pretty as a cowl. I think I have another 3 or 4 sections to go still, and it's a pretty simple pattern once you get knitting on it. And I kind of like it so far. I've had to rip it back once because I screwed up, but you know, that's part of the fun of knitting, so you never know what's going to happen. So I've been working pretty heavily and pretty exclusively on that recently because it's pretty mindless for me, and I actually really like to wear cowls. So it is interesting going through Ravelry and trying to find something with 5 colors in it that was DK, that was going to utilize the majority of each skein, because I don't like to waste and just have little bits at the end. So that was kind of an adventure. But the shift seems to work out pretty well for that. So let's see, that is my cast-ons. I'm also considering casting on a new sweater since I've finished sweaters in the last couple of weeks. I do have a sport weight sweater by Joji Locatelli that I'm currently working on, but it's just not motivating me for some reason to finish it, and I seem to want to cast on all the things. So I have a sweater's quantity for myself of this, which is my silky Aran weight, and it's, I think, a 56% silk with 4% merino and the rest, and 40% alpaca, and it's a chain construction that's Aran. So I have a sweater's quantity, and this is called the color of money right now. And I originally dyed it because I saw in the last Pom Pom magazine that they had a sweater made out of this yarn. So this yarn is actually, it's the Emile base from Illuminati, maybe, yarns. And they had this sweater called the Ceridwen. And it's a really pretty sweater. My only issue with it is that it's really kind of large and bulky when you look at it. So it's really kind of shapeless. So I've considered doing that. But then the more that I got to looking up Aran weight sweaters on Ravelry, I thought, it's a fuzzy type of a yarn, but it almost acts like it's an Icelandic lopi in a way because of how lightly spun it is. It's super airy, and it's got that halo. So I started looking at colorwork sweaters. And I'm going to post a couple of pictures up here of different sweaters that I'm considering for it. So if I consider that, here's my color options that I could do for colorwork. So with this as my base, I could do those 3 colors. Or I have like a tonal variegated color. Or I have this interesting gray that could go with it. Or I have these bright neon speckles, which probably are not going to make it into the selection. Or I have the yarn that I used to knit my beloved hat with. And really, I'm kind of leaning right now towards like these 3, maybe in a colorwork style. Not 100% sure. This is the downfall where if you have your own yarn dyeing business, you start looking at your inventory as your own personal stash. And in reality, you know, hey, you should probably sell some of it instead of using it for yourself. But I really think that this would make an amazing sweater. Each skein's only 54 or 50 grams, but it's 164 yards of an Aran weight, which is a pretty good size amount of yarn, really. But it's just so lightweight. So I'm not 100% sure, but I would love to hear what it is you guys think. So if you can, look at the photos that I'm going to put up here, and then please comment down below, because I need some assistance. I've tried asking my husband, and he's of absolutely no use. He's told me several sweaters that I thought were pretty look like grandma sweaters. So I guess since I'm approaching 40 in January, I've moved into grandma status somehow. Thanks a lot, husband, for making me feel old. So that's an idea for a project that I've got. So we'll see. Finished objects. So this is my finished object for the week. This is the second sweater that I've knit and finished in like the last 2 weeks, which is kind of crazy for me. So this is my, essentially it's a faded cardigan, but it was knit on my Brother 970 knitting machine, and all the yarns are Woolamiza yarns. So this up here is Mamba Samba, Glückstag, and then it goes into Guide to the Galaxy, and then Mondim 7 House. And then the brown, I always forget what it's called. But I finally found buttons at SAFF. I debated back and forth. The problem with doing some colored buttons was that with the amount of color that was already in this, it looked like it clashed a little bit. And then I looked at solid colored buttons, and I couldn't decide on a color, so I finally ended up going with these antler buttons. And they're just really simple, small chunks of, I'm assuming, deer antler. I got these from Sheepish Creations. They have an Etsy store. They also had wooden buttons, and when I was looking back and forth between the wooden buttons and the antler buttons, the guy who was selling them said, well, if you do wooden buttons and if you wash it, your buttons could get ruined. I said, oh, well, normally when you have clothes, you eventually wash them, so I don't know why you would ever stick wooden buttons on there. So I went with antler. He did caution me that dogs really like deer antlers, so I need to keep it out of the way of the dog. Knowing my luck, the little kitten will also like it. So my sweaters are probably going to be living in like Ziploc bags for their own protection. So I like it. The sweaters turned out much better. Originally when I blocked it, what I did to block it was basically run it through the washing machine and the dryer, since it is superwash. And the sleeves were really close fitting at that point. So I decided to wet it back down and block it back out again. The neckband lays quite a bit better now as a result. I think there's still a part that sticks up slightly back here, but if you wear your hair down, nobody will even notice it. You know, especially if you wear it on the side where there's an issue, because then people can't see the problems. I also have a feeling that I may have different number of stitches or rows in my two front pieces, because they're connecting at slightly different spots in the sweater. But you know what? It's my first machine knit garment that I completed on my own, so you know what? I'm happy with it. It's comfortable. It's not itchy, which is a big deal for me. I can't do prickle factor. It drives me up the wall. If I go above a merino or a Polworth, basically my skin starts to crawl. And so I'm kind of a yarn snob about that. So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, though. So that's my only finished object right now. In the last 2 weeks, I did do some machine knitting. When I got back from SAFF, I was really not very motivated. I knew I had probably 200 to 300 pictures that I needed to take and upload into Etsy, and that's kind of a daunting task when you look at it. And I just kind of got down because sales were down from where they were last year, and you're always hoping to make more, you know. I mean, you make expenses, but then you want to make extra because you have ideas in your head like, oh, we're going to buy some new hay for the animals, or a new dishwasher because the old one that's like 20 years old really isn't doing that awesome of a job anymore. So I was kind of hoping for more, but, you know, it happens. I did get to meet a lot of nice people, but, you know, sales were a little off. So I decided I was going to do some instant gratification and do some machine knitting. So I have some custom knitting coming up that I'm doing for an alpaca farm out of their alpaca fiber, and they want some hats to sell out in the Colorado area that are ear flap hats. So I was testing out a couple of patterns. So the first one that I made is this hat. It's just a nice, simple, kind of poinsettia-ish pattern with ear flaps. You know, and I'm going to eventually probably put like some I-cord here on the ends to have little tassels, and I'll either put a pom-pom on the top or something, probably. This is made on my Brother 970, and it's one of the patterns that's already in the machine. And the yarn is called MicroTamm. It's kind of like a microfiber acrylic that's a little bit heavier than a fingering. It's probably a sport weight. And you can see on the inside it's actually lined all the way, so that way you don't see the floats. So to make an ear flap hat, I actually start here, knit all this, then do the 2 ear flaps, which are really pointy toes. In the future, I think I'm going to try to make them a little bit wider and a little more rounded instead of so dramatic. And then once you get done with the ear flaps, you then engage the patterning, and it does both of these at the same time. You decrease to every other stitch, and then there's a hole in the top because you drawstring it. I haven't figured out how to make decreases more similar to what's on real knitting. You know, if I put a big old pom-pom on the top, you won't ever see that. So, but I think the pattern looks pretty nice. I thought about doing the poinsettia parts in more red versus the background versus the pattern. I would have switched it. But I wasn't quite thinking ahead at that time. I was just happy because I didn't get any holes when I was turning the ear flap. And I didn't drop everything off of the needles, which is always nice. My seaming's not too bad. It's a little bit off. And I haven't exactly figured out how I'm going to solve that problem yet. But this is done flat, and then you seam all the way down. And then you seam back up the inside, which my inside seam looks really nice. Thank you, Solid Colors. So then I thought, okay, I want to try doing a programmed in pattern. So my machine has the capability to program all 200 needles, and then I think it's up to 400 rows of custom knitting. And there are some people who actually have computer programs where they take a picture and put the picture into the computer, and they talk back and forth somehow, and they make these picture knits, which are pretty awesome. I wasn't that creative. What I did was I took a pattern that I already owned, which is the NorthShore cardigan by Tin Can Knits, and I modified it slightly, but then I inserted all these individual stitches into my knitting machine and told it how to select things. So originally this is supposed to be water and then trees in the mountains. I'm pretending it's snow because once again I'm trying to knit something for Colorado, and I made a little beanie. My seam here, my tree got a little wonky. You know, I've got to figure out how to change that. The yarn that I used for this was extremely vintage yarn, and it came with one of my knitting machines. And I'm guessing it's from about the early 70s, because the yarn is actually, it's a 50% moth-proofed wool and 50% crimped nylon is what it says, or crimped acrylic. So it's machine washable technically, and I haven't machine washed this one yet, and I'll be very curious to see if it softens up, because right now it feels bulletproof to me. I also did not do gauge swatches on either of these two things, which it might be a good idea, because they're a little close fitting. This one especially, it's kind of like a beanie, more than anything. I mean, here's my ear. It comes down to where I want it to, but if anybody else has a bigger head than me, it's not going to fit them. So, I like the way the pattern came out. I think it entered in nicely. It was, I think, a 10 or 12 stitch repeat, and I had to basically push I did this planned out as 2 colors. So for the background color was, let's say, the black button, and the other color was the white button. So I had to enter in black, white, black, black, white, black, white, all the way across one row, and then push my joystick button upwards and go white, black, blah, 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 the whole way across. It was an interesting challenge. I want to be able to do more of that. Ideally, what I'd really like is there's a computer program that would allow me to hook a laptop into the computer, and it would be, or into the machine, and it would be so much easier to work on. However, that program is something like $400 or $500, which is a chunk of change. If I get to doing a lot of commission knitting, I could see investing in it, and it would really be helpful, because I'd like to do patterns with alpacas in them. And believe it or not, there aren't really very many patterns with alpacas in there. I have reindeers, geese with hearts, and fences galore, but not alpacas. So this hat didn't turn out too bad. It's once again lined, so that way you don't get into the floats. The downer about the floats is there's really no great way to catch the long floats, and so knitting basically a privacy panel is the best way to do it. However, you do use a lot of yarn by basically knitting the hat twice. Once again, a drawstring, some tails that I haven't closed in yet, but I think it's a really cute hat. I think it could go well in Colorado with, you know, outdoorsy, ski-y people. So let's see, those are my finished objects for the week and my machine knit objects. So spinning. So while at SAFF, when I wasn't working on my knitting, I decided to work on my spinning, because it's always nice to have some kind of demonstration. And I was spinning mainly on my Firefly, my Spinolution Firefly because it's electric and it draws the men in because they're like, oh, is that running on a battery? You're cheating. I'm like, no, I'm working smarter, not harder. Up to not cheating, trust me. So I did quite a bit of spinning on my frost yarn bats that I got as part of my Patreon. So I'm on my last bat right now, and this is a 16-ounce bobbin, and I'm betting I've got at least 12 to 13 ounces on it. But you can see underneath there's quite a few other colors. It actually goes into this rust color quite heavily in the middle of it. And now I'm into this blue-gray color combination. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with this yarn yet. It's pretty textured. There's a lot of silk noil in it, and there's also some big chunks of, there's some Fire Star right there, and it's being spun, you know, it's not super thick, but it's also kind of artsy. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. I have the option of course, plying it with itself and doing like a chain ply that would keep all the colors together. Or I may choose a solid color, spin that, and then ply it with a solid color, which would be kind of interesting. Not real sure. I also realized once I got to this third bat that's the gray-blue, and it's eventually going to work its way into more of the blue with these rust parts, that I think I spun them out of order. So I haven't decided how I'm going to fix that problem. And I don't know if I'm just going to try to wind off each bat that I spun onto like a center pull ball and then put them in the order that I like. Not real sure about that yet. So it's a part of the plan. It was fun to spin though. It definitely cruised along. I shouldn't have had time to do all this, but that's the way it goes sometimes at SAFF. I did get to try out the Spinolution Bullfrog. Thanks a ton to Erin James of the Crafty Housewife podcast. She lived somewhat local to the area, and so she brought in her bullfrog for me to try out, and she got to try out my worker bee, which she hadn't tried before. And I really liked the bullfrog quite a bit more than what the pollywog was. The treadling's really nice on it, and it has the nice big bobbins, similar to what my worker bee does. So I think the bobbins are 10 or 16 ounce bobbins. So that worked out really awesome. So thanks a ton, Erin, for coming by. It was awesome to meet you and awesome to get to try out your wheel. So going from spinning into acquisitions. There's of course going to be some acquisitions because of the fact that, you know, I was at a fiber festival. In theory, as a vendor, you really shouldn't be spending what you make. And I did pretty good. I didn't buy a ton of stuff. But when it's not super busy in your booth, you tend to get bored and you tend to wander and look at everybody else's stuff and commiserate with how slow it is. And that can be a pit. So what I got at SAFF, I got my buttons that you've already seen. I got this nice skein of yarn from Two Guys Yarn Company, and it's their Tweedy Toes. And it's 85% superwash BFL and 15% Donegal nylon neps. And it's in the colorway Radioactive. It's nice and bright. Don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I may hold it together with something else and do another colorworky type of a cowl or something. Probably won't make socks out of it because I think that the little bitty neps would annoy the bejesus out of me when I was trying to step on them. So I got that. And then I visited Apothefaery Fabrications, and I knew her from vending out at Estes Park this past year because she vended across from me. And this is 100% merino, the middle of the road sock, and it's a sock set. So it's got a mini skein and a regular size skein, 436 yards, and there's no colorway on this because she was practicing with some new colors and didn't like it. And I said, ooh, that's all right. I will buy it because I think it's my colors. So it actually might look kind of good with, well, maybe not now that I put them up next to each other. Nice idea. Nope. We'll probably do something with both these together. I don't know that I'm going to make socks simply because there's no nylon content. And it's not like I wear my socks a ton, but if I go to the effort to make socks, I don't want them to wear out. So she did a really nice job though, I think. I personally loved this colorway, even if she didn't. And then I managed to buy one braid of fiber from Gail's Fiber Arts. And it's a merino yak silk. And there's no colorway name because she's just starting to dye fiber. But I really liked the colors. And it's kind of very reminiscent of my cowl that I'm working on, in fact. The yak content in it is pretty similar, and the yak is what's causing it to brown out somewhat. So, I thought that was really pretty. It's nice getting to talk with Gail. In other acquisitions, my Patreon bat club came from Frost Yarns, and so I get 3 bats every couple of months. So I got this bat, and it actually coordinates pretty well with what I'm spinning right now. So I may throw it in as part of it, because that would take me up to almost a pound of fiber for sure. And then I got this bat, which is a cool, fun rainbow. And the other bat is this kind of like blue gradient style. And the majority of her bats are superfine merino, Firestar, Angelina, bamboo, silk, silk neps. So, pretty. I love it. I love me some Frost Yarns. If you ever get a chance to get anything from her, I'd highly suggest it. She's out of California, so, and she doesn't post a ton online for sale, but when she does, you need to snap it up pretty fast. So, the only other acquisition that I got was I bought a book based on recommendations from the Knit More girls. They reviewed Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater book. And I have been buying a bunch of sweater books because I want to be able to use patterns on my knitting machine that aren't from the 80s. So this is a really good guide to, it goes over the basics of measuring yourself, you know, and what type of ease do you want in your sweater, where sweaters should hit you. And then it actually goes into tons of, if you're going to cast it on and this is your gauge and this is your size, you can then get a formula for it. So really nice job. There's raglans, there's yokes, cardigans. It covers tons of different things, set-in sleeves, and then it shows how to modify all of this based on stitch patterns, edgings, how to add in pockets. Really, really good book. It retails for $24.99 in the US. I bought it for cheaper on Amazon. I tend to buy on Amazon because it's a little bit lower cost. But there's lots of really great sweater recipes, basically, in this book. So if you're thinking about taking a pattern and then changing it up, whether it's through stitches or whether you can't find the gauge that you want, but you know kind of what it is that you want the style to look like, I'd definitely give it a try. I know she also has a craftsy class called Knit to Flatter, I think it is. And I watched it once, and you actually make a body out of, let me think, plastic bags and like duct tape. And you make a mold of yourself. I haven't found somebody to do that with yet, but I think it would be a lot of fun. So, really good book. Highly recommend it so far. Acquisitions, I think that's it for acquisitions. Travel, I obviously traveled to SAFF. Great show. It's great to get to meet everybody there and see everybody's beautiful creations that they'd done. I had a couple of repeat shoppers, which I always love. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I got to see the Knit Girls, Leslie and Laura, and they were a lot of entertaining fun. I got Leslie to actually take a skein of this yarn, the color of money, and try it out and let me know what it is she thinks. And she's knitting a hat with it right now and absolutely loves it, which that's my goal. I want somebody that actually knows yarn well to give it a try and see what they think for me. So that went well. Our Airbnb that we stayed at was just down the road from an apple place, so we had apple cider donuts one morning, and I also stopped and bought a bunch of Arkansas black heirloom apples, and they were really, really good. They were crisp like a Granny Smith, but not quite as tart. So I ended up with, it's not a half pint, I think like a peck of apples. So I've got, I don't know, 20, 30 some odd apples to eat through, but they're really delicious. So I was impressed with those apples. They actually had an apple sampling area where you could try all the different apples and they had little pieces cut up and stuff. I stayed with my friend Erin, who came down to help out in the booth and hang out. And we went out for Irish pub food one night. We went out for Mexican the night before. And her mother and her friend came and stayed with us in the house for a couple of nights. And that was kind of entertaining because one of the ladies didn't knit at all. So we were kind of blowing her mind with all the different things that you could do with knitting. So that was a lot of fun.
We had 2 older and 2 younger.
Otherwise, besides travel, I don't think I have anything major coming up for the next month. I may do a small craft show here locally. I'm still waiting to hear about whether or not it is I get in for this holiday fair, which, if they would let me know, would be awesome, because I have a bunch of machine knit hats to churn out if I'm getting in, and they don't just knit themselves overnight. So I'm still waiting to hear about that. And I'm also looking for a place this winter to probably do a machine knitting class, where I take all my machines and people who have machines meet up, and I teach them to do a basic ear flap hat. So that way they can get familiar with their machines and decide whether or not it's something that they're even interested in. Past that, I think I may be going to Denver in January for the OOaK show at the stock show, which is kind of towards the end of the month, to help out with the fiber judging there. And I'm also working on an article right now, which is due in like 15 days, about the travels of an alpaca grader and sorter. And it's going to be in a national magazine, so keep your eye out for that in the spring. Hopefully I can get my 2,000 words done and find enough pictures that are high enough resolution to be able to put this in. So I think that's the majority of my knitting for this week. We're going to go out to the sideshow, and with the sideshow this week we're going to meet Peliquin's Perch Jazzy Mr. Speckles. And Mr. Speckles is a llama. He's technically a reverse Appaloosa, which means has giant white spots instead of having colored spots. I don't quite understand that, but I'll believe whatever the registry tells me. Mr. Speckles was our first llama. We actually bought him at 2 weeks old via the internet, about 2 weeks after we got our alpacas. And we were motivated to get a llama because we used to watch the Fabulous Beekman Boys, who are up in New York, and they had a llama named Pokéspot that was always getting into trouble, and we just thought Pokéspot was the most awesome llama in the world. So we ended up with a Mr. Speckles. And Mr. Speckles is a handful. I think he's under 300 pounds, but he's in the 250 range, so he's not a huge llama by any means, but he is a woolly llama, so he's got actually pretty nice soft fiber. It's one of those things where if you blend it, you get gray, which kind of defeats the point of having an Appaloosa. So Mr. Speckles is a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys will enjoy meeting Mr. Speckles. He really enjoys men with beards for some reason. And if you have a beard and you come out to visit, he's going to be your best friend. So we'll put the video in here of that. This is Jazzy Mr. Speckles. Excuse his side mullet there. I kind of got off on his trimming this year. So Mr. Speckles, I think he should be going on 7 now this year. He's usually a real sweetheart and interested in apples. But obviously this apple's not good enough in his opinion. And he's going to, of course, walk away because he likes to go over there and look at the ladies. But he's a pretty llama. He's got nice spots. When we bred him to our girl Dreams... So when we bred him to our girl Dreams, who is this girl over here, do you think he produced spots? Nope, of course not. And as you see, he's not particular about whether it's a llama or an alpaca that he's interested in. He just likes ladies in general. So yeah, he's had 2 babies for us. Both have been kind of like a mousy gray brown with white collars around their neck, which is kind of odd. But yeah, he's a big boy, but he's friendly, he's cute. He's normally very friendly. Today, of course, when I want to film him, he's not. You can tell he's a llama because of his banana ears. Hi, Mr. Speckles. But he's got a couple different colors of spots. He's got some gray spots on his neck, some brown spots on his neck. There's some black ones. Bruce, stop pushing me over. I have a helpful goat here that thinks he needs to shove me around. Come here. You want to try this apple? He also needs his teeth trimmed at the moment. They're a little bit long. But we'll probably get to that later on in the next couple months or maybe this summer at this rate. So that is Peruvian Jazzy Mr. Speckles. He's a very sexy beast. He's very proud of himself. And I'll put a picture in here at the end of him when we let him out to graze. He tends to like to walk up our handicapped ramp and then he'll stare at himself in the sliding glass doors and then kind of strut back down. So he's pretty full of himself, but we love him. He's a sweetheart of a llama. When we picked him up outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and we were driving a PT Cruiser at the time. And he was trained to jump into the back of the cruiser, and he jumped right in. We took off along the interstate, and we got quite the looks from people as we were driving along, because they didn't quite know what to make about that. And we tried to let him out once at a rest area to use the restroom, and of course the first thing everybody asked, oh my god, does he bite? I'm like, no. He doesn't even have top teeth, so I don't think he's going to bite you at this rate. But Mr. Speckles is a sweetheart. He's usually one of the friendliest on the farm. For some reason today he's not. I don't know if he's just embarrassed because his haircut's not the prettiest or what. But lovely little Mr. Speckles. Everybody loves him. So now on to the shop update. So, like I said, I had a lot of photos to take to get all the new stuff up into the Etsy store. I actually had so many new colorways and bases that I didn't have enough hooks for my displays, and I only figured that out about 2 days before SAFF. So luckily I had a bunch of new hooks shipped to Erin, and she brought them down for me, which was awesome. So shop update. There's a bunch of new stuff up in the shop. There's a bunch more of the Merpack Yak Silk, the Silky Erin. There's a bunch of... There's some really interesting Superwash BFL Firestar fingering weight base. So there's a lot of new yarns, and I'm going to insert a photo here, or a video here at the end of all the pictures of all the stuff that went up, and it's kind of a speeded up video. So it's kind of an overview of the things that went into the shop. I also have updated my wall of sparkle, and it's up to, I think I said 60 colors of Angelina. So if you need colors of Angelina, let me know. I got plenty of colors for you. And this week, the shop is going to have a coupon for podcast viewers. So if you're interested in buying something this week, I'll give 20% off with the code Fiber Circus 20. That's all one word, Fiber Circus 20. And the shop code will be active until the next podcast goes up. So you have 2 weeks to do shopping, but it'll give you 20% off. The only thing it will not apply to is power scour, wheels, and drum carters, because I'm not allowed to really discount those. So if you're interested, take a look. And otherwise, it was great to talk to you all, and hopefully you enjoyed the podcast, and I'll plan on seeing you again in 2 weeks. Bye!